Now it looks as he's looking at his phone, or her. Now you're seeing the same individual, only in color. This is all before the shooting. Are they wearing a rain jacket? Are they wearing a video? And you can see where some of the video is not clear. But in my opinion, if you knew who this person was, if that were me in that video, I have to believe that my neighbors would be able to identify me. Okay? Now this is important. The next video clip that you see is going to be very important, and you're going to see why we think this is a person of interest. I am completely comfortable in calling this person a person of interest. Now we have video of this same person that we believe is now running from the area. And this person is running just seconds after the murder. This video is now posted on our Twitter account. It'll be on our YouTube channel. We will send this updated on the media alert. You know, and let me be clear, we're not saying that this person is the suspect, but why after this long, we've had this video out there for so long, why have they not come forward? So they're either not aware of it. Yeah, I want people to take a close look of the one color video, even though it's very short and the video's been enhanced. Look at the style of clothing, the type of hoodie. Is it a hoodie? The traditional thick thermal sweatshirt hoodie? Is it a rain jacket? Is it a long, thin t-shirt style hoodie? Someone has to know who wears clothing like that. Take a look at the pants. What color are they? You know, these are questions I can't answer, but someone who knows this individual walking in this video, and then later running from the area, could possibly be able to give us the answers and tell us who that person is. We believe that this person has ties to this neighborhood, and we want to speak to them. Now, as you know, we have tried to be as upfront and forthcoming as possible. We have released the original video on October 12th. We were only aware of one homicide at the time. The video we released at that time was the best quality in terms of the angle and the clarity of identifying the person. The video that we are releasing today, although I'm not sure it's of much better quality as far as being able to identify the race or the sex of the person, in my opinion, it gives us more than enough information that somebody should be able to identify this person. I don't want people jumping to conclusions when they're watching this video. I don't want to influence their opinion when they're watching this video. That's why I'm very careful in trying to identify what this person might be wearing and what they're doing. So let's look at, when you think about this person running, why are they running? Now, when we release this video, everybody's going to crawl out of the woodwork. You're going to hear from profilers and the professionals and the retired law enforcement, and they're going to create a lot of speculation that leads to absolutely nothing. Okay, they look at odds. This isn't Vegas. This is a homicide investigation. We need names, not speculation. We need people to tell us, this is who I think it is. Not a broad range of age and suspicion. In my opinion, and I'm not being sarcastic, I think everybody knows how serious and passionate I am about this investigation. There are probably, I've come up with 4 reasons why this person is running. 1, they may be late for dinner. 2, they're out exercising. 3, they heard gunshots. And number 4, they just murdered Benjamin Mitchell. You have any questions?
Chief, are you guys getting desperate for clues and
Now, we're receiving phone calls, we're receiving information. We're hoping that this video, and you're aware of, those of you in the business know how the time-consuming job and task it is to edit video, review video in real time. It takes some time to collect video. This is various cameras at various angles, and this is how we put this together. I have been very hesitant to label anyone on this. I am now coming out and calling this a person of interest.
Was this video required through your Project Red program?
I don't know that specifically. We have so many wheels moving right now that I know that during our investigation we collected this video.
The neighbors give you this video through their cameras?
We got the video from the neighborhood. I cannot disclose where it came from.
Can you touch again on the timeline of him walking in that direction and then running in regards to the shooting? Can you go over that again?
Well, if you see it, it's interesting. This person looks like they're just going for a walk. They don't look like they're going out to do anything other than go for a walk. But the cop of me says, why are you running seconds after the murder of Benjamin Mitchell? And that's the answer we want.
Is it running the opposite direction or the same direction?
Yes, it's running a different direction from where they were walking. So it appears that they are walking towards where Benjamin Mitchell was, and then they are running away from the scene.
Can you say what direction they're coming from and going towards?
No, I can't.
It was not a particularly cool evening. I know that some people fashionably wear hoodies, but have you wondered why somebody has a hoodie up like that on the evening that it's not particularly cold?
No, I don't really speculate much on that. When you live in Florida, and that's just the fashion that people do these days. That I think is kind of a myth from movies. I'm really not putting a lot of speculation as to the length of the jacket. There was some rain earlier in the evening. Maybe it's a raincoat. I don't want to fuel too much speculation. I want people to come to their own conclusions and not listen to what Brian Dugan thinks, because they may think I have some inside information, and I don't want to sway their opinion. I want someone to step up and go, this is who we think that person is.
Chief, that was about a block, that video. About a block where Anthony Nicolai was also murdered. So does anybody show up the night of Nicola's murder similarly looking to this person?
We are still sifting through all that.
So you have to get in touch to determine if there's another.
We don't know what the video will show. We're still sifting through hours upon hours of video. We're very comfortable and confident, and this was the night of Benjamin Mitchell's murder, and that's why we want to speak to this person. And we have already, been very clear that we think they're all related.
Any idea how many videos you've gotten in so far? You said hours and hours of video. How many people have provided you with video?
I don't have the specific number, but when you look at video, when you download video from someone's home, it can take several hours just to download the video itself, and then to bring it back here and go through it and then enhance it. The video that we released is enhanced. It's actually taken at a very far distance, and through our technology, we're able to enhance it. Now, when we enhance video, you then start losing the resolution, which is why it's not so clear of the sex and the race and everything of this person.
Is there a timestamp on the video? Is there a video system have an actual minute, second?
I don't have that answer, but I can tell you it's within seconds of the murder.
And this is from a home, not a business?
Through several different places, locations. I shouldn't say several, from a few different locations.
So both home and business?
I don't know.
And it's safe to say running away from the scene?
Yes, they're walking to the scene, and then they are running away from it.
Was there any audio recorded? Did you hear a gunshot on any of the video that you have?
We don't have that.
Can you talk directly to our viewers? I mean, this man or woman is flipping their phone, dressed a certain way, about the familiarity of this person. They may not recognize him immediately, but can you tell our viewers what they should be paying attention to and when they should kind
to me, what stands out is the clothing, the upper clothing. It is, you know, it's unique. The color of the pants, it's difficult to tell. The reason I focus in on the flip, because I have tried to do that myself several times and have dropped my phone. Now, I'm not a millennial. I'm not part of the selfie generation. I don't know if that is common for that. But I can tell you I've asked other people to do it, and they've dropped their phones. That might be a habit of this person. At this point, everything is a clue, everything's a speculation. The bottom line is this person may be completely innocent, but we want to talk to you.
Chief, how frustrating is that you had this video and you've already released it, and yet you're still at the same point that you were a couple of weeks ago?
Well, I think this video here is very encouraging. When you're able to look at that and place it, we've taken several different shots and spliced it together, which I don't know what the actual word, that's an old school term, but when you look at how we've been able to put this together using different types of technology, this is encouraging to me. Someone I would think knows who this person is. Like I said, they may not realize it. Okay, thank you.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Fox 10 News Now stream, part of fox10phoenix.com. We continue to wait for those JFK files to be released. I'm going to take you out to Chicago, where a new predictive technology is being used by the Chicago police. Let's listen in.
Eddie Johnson has been doing here, and so it's my pleasure to bring up Eddie Johnson and talk about the great stuff that we're doing here in the city of Chicago. Thank you, Commander.
So before I get started, I'd really like to thank Alderman Scott Munoz for their unwavering support to CPD. You know, as I said before, it takes everyone in the city actually to reduce this gun violence, and we're heading in the right direction. The centerpiece of our CPD's crime strategy this year has been the investment in predictive policing technology in some of our most active districts, investments that, quite frankly, are showing significant signs of progress. We couldn't make these investments without the support of our great mayor, Rahm Emmanuel, who's given us, CPD, the resources we need to change the face of policing in Chicago. I'd also like to thank our community partners joining us here today for their support as we implement meaningful, positive, and sustainable change throughout CPD. These investments we're making have made us smarter and faster, especially in the districts that present the greatest challenges in violence. First, with the 7th and 11th districts earlier this year, then the 6th, 9th, and 15th districts, and today the 10th district is going online with this suite of technologies now that ShotSpotter installation has been completed. While we're only in the first year of this program, we've seen promising signs that utilizing this technology to make us more predictive in our deployments and faster in our response times is actually helping us to reduce the crimes across the city. In the 6th, 7th, 9th, 11th, and 15th districts, which have all had historical challenges with violence, we're seeing significant reductions in shooting incidents compared to last year. Let me just point out, in the 7th District, Inglewood, where this technology was first launched, shootings are down 44% compared to 2016 and nearly 23% less than where they were in 2015. In raw numbers, that's over 135 less shootings this year than last year. On average, districts equipped with this technology have seen a 22% reduction in shootings compared to 2016. In fact, 18 of 22 districts across the city have seen reductions in shootings this year when we compare it to last year, and 7 districts have even seen reductions in shootings compared to the year 2015. And while we have a great deal of work still ahead of us, it's certainly headed in the right direction. As in the districts before it, the 10th district will have its own dedicated strategic decision support center, district-wide ShotSpotter technology, which has just been completed, an expansion of pod cameras, and the incorporation of mobile technology to officers in the field here in the 10th district in the station-based strategic decision support center. District leadership, officers, and civilian crime analysts from CPD and the University of Chicago will monitor developments in gang conflicts now in real time. That will help make fluid decisions regarding deployments and allow us the ability to make changes to our strategy as the situations dictate. For officers in the field, they'll be able to access real-time intelligence information and instant notifications from ShotSpotter through mobile phones equipped with the software. I'd like to thank the Chicago Fire Department as well as OEMC for their assistance in helping us to get some of these systems integrated. I'd also like to thank the University of Chicago for their valuable partnership as we are succeeding in reducing gun violence across the city. It's important to remember that this is just one piece of the strategy to reduce crime. We'll also continue to rely on the hard work and dedication of our officers out on the streets who risk their lives every day to make our city safer. And we'll also rely on the support from the community leaders and residents to help lead the charge to put the guns down across the city and create a culture of accountability among gun offenders. And now I'd like to introduce someone who has been a great partner for me and CPD since I became superintendent, Mayor Rahm Emmanuel.
I want to thank the superintendent, and also and as the alderman said, and both aldermen, complimenting the leadership here in the 10th district and the entire rank and file. Because one other note, and the soup is absolutely right. This technology allows the police department to go from a reactive to a proactive strategy. In the past, it was if there was a shooting, where is the next shooting going to be? Our goal now, under the superintendent's effort, both in my view of making sure that we have the best technology, the best training, and the best sense of size of force, is to actually stop the first shooting happening in the first place. And I want to compliment, while we ran through all the reductions, and the superintendent's right, overall, the districts with the new technology are down almost a full quarter. What district is number 2 in the city in seizing guns off the street? The 10th district, and I want to commend the commander for that leadership and that effort. So just by way of reference, to kind of put it together, Chicago, under the superintendent, under the commander, under the rank and file, over a little close to almost 7,000 guns have been taken off the street this year alone. The 10th district right here, number 2 in the city, showing that even before the shot is happening, they are doing the proactive work we want to see, not waiting for a shot, stopping the shot before it happens, before somebody gets hit. Now, also, I'm going to talk a little about the police, but I want to compliment all of you that are here. You can talk about size of force, you can talk about technology, you can talk about training. All that is essential. But there is as strong as the partnership in this room. And I know I speak for the superintendent, the commander, the 2 aldermen that are also here, because we have a pastor here, runs a great boxing program. We have a number of individuals that run after-school activities in community groups and block clubs. That relationship is as important, if not more important and essential, than the technology we just saw. And I have seen it countless times. And the fact that you've taken time out of each of your individual day to be here, to inaugurate the 10th district getting what we call the proactive technology, the strategic center here in the district, means that it speaks volumes, in my view, about the strength of the police department. Not just the trust, but the cooperation. Our entire strategy as a city is to put more police on the street and get kids, guns, and gangs off the street, which is why we're on an unprecedented investment in adding nearly 1,000 new officers with the technology, not just that you saw downstairs, but by the end of the year, a year ahead of schedule, every officer will have a body camera and the training to use it. So it has to be on. Tasers, the technology here, and I should probably also note, not just more guns. We were very proud of all the investments we made. It was also the 10th district that developed an app to go with that technology, so if there's a gun, they can send that communication directly to all the other officers that are out on the street with their iPhones in that area. So not just saying, give us the technology. It was an officer here in the 10th that developed an app for the police department to take it a step further. So I want to commend the commander for that leadership and asking each officer, you're not just receiving training, you're not just receiving technology, we want you engaged in improving what we're doing here in the effort. And then also, most important, which is also not only in this area, what you saw downstairs, 6 other police districts throughout the city of Chicago We'll now get these strategic decision centers, so we'll be up to 12 out of the 22 districts. We'll have the most recent technology to do predictive policing to stop a shooting before it ever occurs, which is why these districts are running ahead of the citywide effort in seeing overall reduction of shootings by almost a full quarter. As the superintendent noted, in Englewood, they're down 45% over 2016 and 23% over 2015, meaning they are really ahead of schedule, and that has been up and running the longest. And the aldermen have been supportive of our investments in the technology in the other 6 districts, 2, 3, 4, 5, 25, and 8. More importantly is also this year, like every year before, we are adding resources to after school, summer jobs, mentoring, and safe passage routes. Because as strong as the police department is, we need to make sure that our kids are with mentors, whether it's boxing, whether it's with athletic, artistic, or academic. They have something to do when the bell rings at the end of the day. They don't just go back out to the streets. They're involved with a caring adult who can educate them. And then the superintendent and I worked together after years and also made sure that we now have tougher sentences for repeat gun offenders. You're a repeat offender, you don't belong on the streets near our children and our families. And then ensuring that we also make the type of investments so we create a real vibrancy to our economy with coffee shops, restaurants, dry cleaners, and all that investments that you see happening. And we have more work to do. Today, the announcement, and I want to be proud that the 10th district, while we're coming to the 4th quarter in the end, is up and running. They were not waiting for the technology, but doing the hard work of getting more guns off the street, as we said, putting more police officers on the street, making sure that we're using technology to stop a shooting from happening in the first place, and making sure our kids have the type of activities that we want to see for our own children. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't also then conclude by, obviously, people know about our 2 officers on the south side of Chicago that got hurt in a car accident. First and foremost, our thoughts are with them. The good news is, as of now, they're in good condition. But I think we also have pictures of the car, and there's some real damage there, and thank God they are safe. And I think the information yet is not clear about what happened in that area. As it unfolds, we'll obviously make that available. Most importantly, they were out at night doing their job that we asked them to do for all of us. And we cannot forget that there's officers at all times of the day out on the streets doing things for us, making sure that we're safe. There's risks associated with it, sometimes more serious than the one we saw. But the good news is they are safe. We'll find out what happened and do whatever we need to do to make sure it doesn't happen again. But again, I want to commend the superintendent for making an essential decision strategically, as the alderman noted, and both of them have we talked about on our way in, to go from reactive policing to proactive policing. And the technology you saw with all the cameras and all the shot spotter and with the algorithms, in the end of the day, it is to lead a department like here in 10 to make sure that we don't react to when a shooting happens to think about what the second shooting is going to be and happen. It's to stop the first shooting from happening in the first place. At the right time, the right place, right leadership. That is exactly what we're trying to do, and I want to commend all of you for being a part of our effort of turning and bringing safety to our streets, so all of us as parents can do what we need to do, which is allow our kids to play at either a park, a playground, in front of the house, or be on the stoop, free from the fear of violence. Thank you. John? Well, I prefer that speechless question. Okay, go ahead.
When you see this, and you've been exposed to it a lot, but when you see the results it's showing, how do you react?
Well, let me, I'm going to let the soup also go, but first of all, I am a big believer in technology, but we should also, this is my own view. I am really pleased that the superintendent demanded that we make the change from reactive to predictive policing. Technology is powerful. The actual, and this is one observer, is technology, the biggest thing that I think it does is it helps give our officers the confidence to do the job professionally and proactively. So when you say, yes, is it good to see all the cameras all around? Be able to have a shot spotter, not wait for a 911 call? Absolutely. Predictive to the ability to be smarter about, more strategic. We want you in this zone. We think that's where it's going to happen, and you can see that reduction. But don't, while I am for the technology, obviously we wouldn't be investing not only here but in the other 6 districts. I leave this to the soup to talk, and I'll just set it up and then let him go. The biggest thing we have seen is that, like a young officer says, well, here's a new app. They didn't wait for the shot spotter. They already are leading in guns reducing, so from the street, pulling more guns off the street. It has made our officers have the confidence to do exactly the work we want to see being done on a proactive basis. So while I suppose the short way of saying it is I obviously am enthralled with technology, I also understand that there are limitations. And unless you have the leadership, the determination to give our officers the confidence, no technology will bridge that gap. What we have is great leadership, willing to make sure that the officers know that we will support proactive professional policing, and you're seeing the results and the benefit of that effort. Soup?
You know, I tell you this, being a cop for almost 30 years, cops are skeptical initially about technology. They are. And so when I saw what that technology could do, there was no question in my mind that we should utilize it and try to see if it would help us with our gun violence reduction. And I have to say, and I hope I'm not putting Commander Sanchez out there when I say this, but because it's going to get him in trouble with a few other commanders. But he actually has a version of it in his office. So he's able to monitor that stuff from his seat. And I'll say this, the mayor is right. Technology is a tool. It's a piece of it. You can't ever replace human intel from the officers on the street and from these citizens that are sitting here, because gun violence in Chicago is not just a CPD issue, it's a Chicago issue. So it takes all of us, everything we can put out there to reduce this gun violence, that's what we're going to do. So I'm very pleased with where we are, you know, in terms of driving the violence down. We've seen really positive results. Is that success? No. But it is progress, and that's what we have to do. You got to start somewhere. We had a horrible 2016. We did. But we have to remember that some of these districts are surpassing the gains that we made in 2015, which is really positive. So, and remember this, our overall shootings and murders are now down about 550, somewhere around there. Remember this, every shooting that we have could potentially be a murder. So that's 500 and something less people that actually have been shot citywide. So that's something to be positive about, you know. So the technology, it does help a lot. It helps a lot. But I just want to emphasize there's no replacing the human portion of it. And the leadership that Commander Sanchez has shown is just, you know, it's very gratifying for me.
Can you also update us from your understanding where the investigation and how the officers are doing?
Yeah, so these were some 3rd District officers that were driving through the 4th District, and they didn't see the construction zone. So the good news is that they're in stable condition now. They're just evaluating them to make sure that they are okay. We're not sure if the construction zone was properly marked, if somebody moved some of the barriers. We just don't know. So as the investigation continues, I'm sure we'll find out. We haven't had an opportunity yet to view the in-car camera footage, but when we do, and as information becomes available, then we'll share it with you.
Do you know if there was a pursuit action or anything in particular that you can tell us about the circumstances before the accident?
So as far as we know, there was no pursuit or anything like that. For some reason, they didn't see it. So as I said, you know, the investigation is early in its infancy stages, so we'll just have to wait until the investigation moves forward.
John, I want to add one point. This may be giving me a moment to think about what you said. I would say 2 quick things on the technology. It allows us to bring intelligence with intuition and put the 2 together. Nothing will replace intuition of an officer in the history him or her have, but it also allows you through data analytics and technology to be all that more effective, strategic about it. So I would say it brings in what uniquely works is intelligence and intuition going together. Now, while you're here, and we've said this, but I really want to emphasize, the reduction is, obviously, we think enough about the technology in the room that we're asking you to come here. But while we ask you, there's a lot of community leaders here. Is the technology downstairs or in that room that's also in the car more powerful than an after-school program, a summer job program? The two together are really powerful. Separate, they're really good. Together, really powerful. And so there's not a time that Soup and I don't meet. And I said this in my budget speech, and I know this I don't want to say I'm speaking for the aldermen, but I'm speaking for the aldermen. There's not one of them that don't ask, Commander, Soup, alderman, I need more summer jobs, more after school, more safe passage routes, more mentoring. I just got a letter the other day from 2 other aldermen in different parts. They want more of the Becoming a Man mentoring program. So individually, really good. Together, unbelievably powerful. So while you're enamored appropriately, we are, with technology, it's also all the people that are around this room, and I mean all the people that bring safety to the different communities that make up the 10th district. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Fox 10 News Now stream. We are going to go to some breaking news out of suburban Chicago. This is in St. Charles, a suburb of Chicago. Armed burglary at this home here. Let me just put this up there. Armed burglary at a home. Suspects still at large at this time. So you're taking a look at the police response here. Let me get some more information here for you right now in the Fox 10 News Now stream. Okay, from local media reports here, police were searching this afternoon for a burglar near St. Charles North High School. The school was put on a soft lockdown because of a burglary west of the school around 2:30 their local time, according to an email sent. St. Charles North parents. Police said burglar was still at large. As you can see, that chopper is leaving. We'll try to have more information for you if we do get it available. I'll take you out to Colorado, where Vice President Mike Pence is touring Lockheed Martin right now. Let's take a look. All right, so if we get a better shot of this, or if he is going to be speaking, we will bring that to you right here on News Now. Coming up next, fixing Detroit schools. Listen how the district plans to rebuild in 3 years.
And I'm in the 4th grade. I'd like to introduce Principal Jawar.
Thank you, Micaiah. On behalf of our students, our teachers, our staff, thank you for joining us at Charles Wright today. We are a technologically focused elementary school that prepares our students for the 21st century. Our dedicated and talented staff utilizes an array of technologies in their classrooms as we help our students unlock their full potential. We are committed to our students and families, and we are proud of the young men and young women that they become. We know that they will go on to do great things. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Board of Education Vice Chair, Angelique Peterson Mayberry.
Good morning. I'm excited. This is a great day in Detroit Public Schools Community District. I stand before you so proud, not only as the vice chair of the newly elected school board, where we have some additional school board members present with us. Thank you this morning. But I also am a DPS alum. I'm excited to say that I'm a DPS alum. I'm also the parent of a DPS student. One recently graduated last year and one currently still in our district. So it's a great time. I'm very proud. After taking office in January, one of the tasks that we had to complete as a board collectively was to bring in a superintendent. Not only a superintendent who we thought could follow the vision of what we were trying to create together, but one who had a track record of transformation. And we think we've done that. As we talk about the exciting time today, we are only 5 months into this new superintendent's tenure, and we can say that he has begun to deliver on some of those promises that he has collectively sat down with the board and said that this is something that him and his team will be able to do. So we're excited because as we stand here, we're in a different place this year than we were last year. There was not an elected school board at this time last year. There was not a superintendent last year. And there was not the amount of students enrolled in the district that we have this year. So let's give each other a hand. I know we're all recruiting actively to get students in our district, and we're excited about that. It's important that we are all on this journey together as we try to improve traditional public education in the city of Detroit. It can't be done alone. As Dr. Beatty says all the time, grab your brick, let's build. But we need you. We need you. We need you. Whether you have a child in the district or whether you're in the sound of my voice, please take this as a personal invitation to say that we need you on this journey. I would like to bring up someone to speak to some of the successes because we'll celebrate them all. No matter how small, we will celebrate the successes because they could be failures. So we will celebrate all successes. And one of those is the enrollment. We're excited about that. And I would like to bring up our new Superintendent of Detroit Public Schools Community District, Dr. Nicolai Beatty.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming this morning. We have exciting news. As our vice chair indicated, for the first time in 15 years, let me repeat that, 15 years, the school district can announce an increase in enrollment. Yes, let's all clap on that. So last year, or after the 2-week count period, we had an enrollment of about 45,500 students. Today, we can claim after the 2-week count period, an enrollment of over 50,100 students. What's also exciting about today's announcement is that enrollment number exceeds our anticipated FTE number. So there's always a difference between FTE and actual enrollment because FTE is linked to funding. And so we, based on our budgeted amount and our now actual budgeted or anticipated budget amount, we see an increase of 1,800 FTE. So that translates to a projection of almost $11 million. So as I've indicated several times, there's very few indicators when you look at the academic and overall health of an organization, specifically a district, than enrollment. Why? Because enrollment is the intentional act of parents saying, I choose you as the location and place that I am entrusting educators and principals to make sure that my child's God-given academic and civic potential becomes a reality. So there, again, when you're looking at indicators of health and progress, very few other than enrollment speaks to that. For us, this allows us to have stability with our budget as we try to move out of the oversight of the FRC. Last year we had a balanced budget. So far we have a balanced budget. This additional revenue will also help us build out the initiatives under our strategic plan, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. So as we think about these enrollment numbers and you unpack the data, a couple other stories become clear. One, for the first time in over 4 years, we've seen a reduction in the number of students that are leaving our district for charter schools. You also see an increase in students that have left charter schools to come into our district for the first time in years. In addition to that, we've seen a reduction of students leaving our district for nearby districts in Metro Detroit, and we've seen an increase of students that have left surrounding Metro Detroit suburbs to actually come back to Detroit. So not only are we seeing an increase in enrollment, but we're also seeing a decrease in the number of students leaving and an increase in the number of students coming in again. So this also speaks to the vibrancy of our change process moving forward. So a lot of people ask me why. What do you contribute to this improvement? I think the first factor is an elected, empowered board. I think the community is now recognizing that for the first time in over a decade, we have true local control. Lansing is not dictating our decision-making, not determining personnel decisions, but instead, Detroiters have elected a board that represents their visions, their needs, their desires, and that elected board has appointed, and very proud to say this and a privilege, a superintendent that has a track record of success. So the combination of local control and a track record of reform has led to an increase in credibility, and that is reflected in enrollment. Also, change is hard. I made already some decisions regarding who would lead our enrollment efforts, and Alicia Merriweather has taken the lead in increasing enrollment. I want to thank her for her leadership, and also Keisha Vidusco, who I don't know if Keisha is here, but that was also another change going into this year. Both of these very capable leaders have led our district-wide efforts, and it's also been a whole all-hands-on-deck effort as far as recruiting teachers back to our system. Whether it's the board, myself, the two leaders are indicated, our teachers, our principals, even our parents are taking greater ownership of promoting our schools and an effort to increase enrollment. So as we think about the work these past 5 months, let's just take a moment to look back, but then also look forward to how we're going to build on this momentum. So an increase in enrollment. Teacher vacancies are down. For the first time in over a decade, we have an increase in teacher salaries with a new contract, a bonus for those that are on top, an increase in January, and another increase to subsequent January. For the first time, we're seeing higher collaboration with the mayor's office with the expansion of the summer rec programs, and now 9 more additional rec centers being open after school to support our students. We've reduced the number of administrators at the district level, which has created more revenue for schools into this school year. And November 7th, we'll launch the first time in years that all of our teachers and leaders will actually come together at Cobo Hall for professional development in order to build the capacity of our teachers and leaders as we move into the future. So with all of that said, we are hardly stopping here. This is only signs of the future and only signs of the momentum of where we're going. So part of today's announcement is not only to talk about enrollment and some other successes, but also to announce to the community how we're going to rebuild this district moving forward through our strategic plan. So this strategic plan has been approved by our school board on a 7-0 vote. It's reflective of a number of meetings between myself, our leadership team, and the board. It's also reflective of 15 sessions that included over 300 internal and external stakeholders asking everyone, where are we, what's working, what's not, and how do we rebuild this school district together. Those 15 sessions generated 800 different ideas from people throughout internally in the district and externally. It's a true reflection of the inside community and the outside community, and it clearly creates an anchor and a foundation by which we're going to build off of as we rebuild this district. So with that said, I'm going to go into the specifics of our strategic plan, starting with our vision and mission statements. So our mission statement is very clear. We educate and empower every student in every community every day to build a stronger Detroit. And so a couple key points here is that obviously we're about education, but we're also about empowerment. That education is about empowering our students to overcome the day-to-day challenges that they face, whether that's linked to socioeconomic background, whether it's linked to homelessness, special education status. We are about empowering students to give them the shield and the sword to go out in this community and fight the injustices that they face every day in order to create a better opportunity for themselves. But it's not just some students, and this is key, and you're going to see this throughout our strategic plan. It's every student, not some, not those that have parents that are advocating for them every day, not those that come with a college degree, but every student, every community. And this is what is different about our district as we move forward. It's every zip code, it's every community throughout Detroit every day, not some days, we're not going to miss Fridays, we're not going to miss Monday after a long weekend. It's every day. And it's also about building a stronger Detroit. What resonated throughout the conversation was that we need a strong traditional public school system. As we see the rebirth of business in Detroit, as we see new stadiums coming aboard, new companies coming in, we will never reach the potential that this city offers unless we have a stronger public education and we give excellence to all students academically in our district. So there was an explicitness with that the rebuilding of Detroit, the renaissance of Detroit economically has to accompany a stronger school district in order to create a stronger Detroit. Vision. And this is about where the big thinking and ambition and inspiration comes from. Again, you're going to see all students will have the knowledge, skills, and confidence. So obviously we're talking about usually literacy, math, science, and social studies as our core, but all of that is about the knowledge and skills, but more importantly, even confidence. And so it's not just the core academics, but it's the confidence that goes along with being successful, not only to strive and thrive in the city, our nation, and our world, because we realize that our students are not just competing against themselves. They're competing against students from across this country and the world as a whole. And that's our goal, to make sure that students have the skills, knowledge, and confidence to be successful in a global economy, but rooted in the city of Detroit. So now we'll move into core values. So we've talked a lot about changing the culture of our district and making a student-centered organization. We know that adults care for our students, they work with our students every day, and they need to be supported, but our district is moving into a child-centric direction, that our decision-making is going to be at its foundation about children and what children need immediately. So make decisions that are in the best interest of students, use every resource strategically so that we meet students' individual needs. And this was a resounding theme, that we are doing great things with pockets of children. We have great schools in isolation, but our work is scale. How do we take the great things that are happening at Burton International? How do we take the great things that are happening at CAS or Renaissance and scale them so every school looks like that every classroom has those characteristics, so that every student's needs are met? Not thinking about students as widgets, but thinking students as individual points of talent and opportunity, and changing programming and experiences to meet those individual needs to reach their potential. Excellence. No longer will we settle for mediocrity. No longer will we settle for being average. We need excellence, and that was a resounding theme that came out in the focus groups, internally and externally, that our children deserve excellence. So we are going to be relentless with this pursuit of greatness, not being average, not being okay, not being compliance-driven, but excellent as an organization. We're going to be bold and innovative. These are some of the reflective changes. The board demonstrated a degree of boldness in picking me as a superintendent. That was against the grain. Many people challenged and wondered about that decision. So now I have come forth in making hard, difficult decisions like changing administrators, reducing the number of administrators, even putting individuals back in the classroom. That may not be accepted by those that are affected by those changes, but those are already student-centric, student-focused, and it's about being bold and innovative to create change and positive change for our children. So learn from our mistakes. We are not perfect. perfect? We have not been perfect as an organization, but how do we learn from those mistakes, and how do we learn from our mistakes in the future? And then hold yourself and others to high standards. And this is about shared ownership and accountability, that we're not waiting for the board, we're not waiting for the superintendent, we're not waiting for the principal leader, but individually, collectively, we have to own our own spaces and our own work in order to create a culture of excellence. Integrity, and this actually came directly from the board, do the right thing even when no one is looking. Isn't that a great phrase? So it's not when the media, not when the cameras are on, not when you're being interviewed, not when you're going through an audit, but doing the right thing even when people aren't looking, and imagining as if people are looking when decisions are made. And that's how we'll overcome some of the, at times, malfeasance that has been a part of our district, some of the cronyism that has been part of our district, and we're going to shed that and start making decisions as if every decision we make are going to be transparent and in the public type of decisions, be honest, be trustworthy, be accountable, that we're all accountable to what children need, no matter what the space we're in. Equity, diversity is an asset. We talked about this last night. Public education has always been all. There's a beauty and a beast with that. We take children that do not speak one word of English. We take children that are homeless. We take children that have been completely neglected. All means all. We don't differentiate, but that's a strength. What the beauty of public education is, you see the reality of life, and our children are exposed to that immediately, so when they go on to life, they can interact with people that are different than them, that think differently than them, that challenge their ideas and where they come from. That we advocate for the needs of others, and we ensure that all members of our community have access to the tools and resources they need to be successful. And this is about recognizing that not everyone should get the same amount of resources. We have to start differentiating among schools and among children, and we have to be okay with that. That even some teachers may make more money, some principals may make more. We may have some additional wraparound services in some schools, but we're going to justify that through data and the actual needs of children, and we're going to understand that giving everyone the same is not necessarily an act of fairness. Core values, service, we listen, we empathize, we respond, and again, you see this theme of ownership, own problems to help to solve them. We're not going to wait for someone to solve the problem for us. We're not going to wait for Lansing or DC. We're not going to wait for, the teacher is not going to wait for the principal to say do this or that, but she or he will take ownership of the problem because they're empowered to be leaders in their own space to advocate and do right for children. We may not all agree in doing our work, but we'll listen to complaints. We'll problem solve through them so that we create, again, that shared ownership. And this tenacity is already a reflection of who we are as a district. Through years of emergency management, some examples of vacuums of leadership. Our principals, our teachers, our district staff have stood tall and persevered through quite a bit. Our students persevere through quite a bit. So this is, I think, already a reflection of who we are, but we need to build on this and apply tenacity more to our children academically. Our children are tough. They're resilient. They've gone through a lot, but they have to learn how to take that resilience and apply it to their academic work, and so that can be their springboard for greater opportunity. So embrace hard work and persevere in the face of challenges. Follow through on your commitments and strive to do your best no matter what. So this reflects vision, mission, and core values. This will be the foundation of who we need to be, who we will be, and who we will work and hard together to become. Are we here yet? Absolutely not. We know that. But this is why we need this anchor, this foundation to build off and always refer back to. So as a district, we will promote this. We will recognize our employees when these values are reflected, and we'll remind ourselves and hold ourselves accountable when we stray from these values as we move forward with this work. And then the priorities, which the priorities indicate in greater specificity how we will rebuild this district. So it gets more into the how. We selected 5 areas to focus on when we look at our priorities, and I'll go over those starting with the one to your far left. So I wouldn't say priority number one, but a significant priority will outstanding achievement. We all know we have to raise student achievement. We have to make sure that more of our students are reading at grade level, that they're performing mathematics at grade level, that they're more proficient in science and social studies. All of this culminates in making sure that a greater percentage of our students are college and career ready. This means that SAT scores are higher, more students are actually enrolling and being successful in college, and if they're not going to college, they're successful in the world of work. This is in lots of ways on the career side reflective of our most recent work with Randolph, which is another clear success point that we can speak to. So we have to become more comfortable to understand we need multiple pathways. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Students have wonderful talents that may not be reflective in a college setting, but instead it might be a plumber, it might be a carpenter. We're gonna expect everyone to be college ready, but we're gonna offer multiple pathways for success. A lot of our students may start as a plumber and go back to college, but they'll have the resources in order to do that. Transformative culture. This also speaks to the values. We know that as a community of learners, we have to become more transparent. We have to make sure that our students feel safe. We have to feel that our employees feel safe, not only physically safe, but socially, emotionally safe. That it's all right to advocate for something different. It's all right to speak out and use your name and speak out and say, I disagree on this issue and I think we should do this instead. And everyone's comfortable with that kind of pushback and conversation. That we are respectful and that we connect to one another. So we're not always going to agree in this work. I realize that as superintendent, the board recognizes, our principals recognizes, our district staff, that you can't go about creating change where everyone is always going to agree. But can we create space where we own differences and disagreement and work to a place of compromise and collective ownership? But we also have to make sure that our students are connected, that parents are connected to this body of work, that when they come into school, they're respected, they're greeted with hello, that parents may not have the right language and tone all the time, but can we walk and talk through that issue to make sure that their voice is heard and understand. Transformative culture is also about how we treat students who make mistakes. Instead of excluding them from the learning environment, how do we keep them in? How do we build students up rather than building them down, if you will, through a more restorative culture, a more progressive culture with discipline. Whole child. This is one of the most resounding points of emphasis that the internal and the external stakeholders had. So much to talk about the whole child. Obviously, when we think about the whole child, we immediately often think of arts and music. And so, as I said, on and on and on, rebuilding this district is not all about doing things completely differently. Sometimes it's about doing what always worked. DPS once was known for having rich culture when it came to the arts. So how do we rebuild that? How do we offer that again? So our vision is that every school offers an art or a music program or both. That all of our students are going to the Detroit Institute of Arts or the music hall. That this is a common everyday practice. It's who we are. That we are offering electives beyond the core academic areas, whether it's be career academies focused on law, criminal justice. But whole child also relates to health and wellness. Our students need more exercise. Every school deserves a physical education teacher and having access to gym. Our students need to be eating meals that they actually like and are nutritious. So that's a work in progress. This also relates to wraparound services. We must have more social workers and psychologists at our school. We have to put our medical and dental work at school so students or parents don't have to go through a litany of red tape in order to access that. So creating full-service schools and community schools, an initiative that we're working on right now with DFT, specifically in our partnership schools. So the whole child is about recognizing that core academic work sometimes is not what inspires a child. But if we are accessing the whole child with more strategy and more intentionality, that we can build their confidence and connect them, build their self-esteem, so they are willing to take risks and challenges in the core academic areas. Athletics is another key component of the whole child. So restoring athletics in our elementary and middle schools. So finally, again, going back to what we did well, coaches are teachers. Coaches are guidance counselors. Coaches are security guards. And so that allows students, when they make mistakes, to be accountable in school and connect that to what they value, which is athletics. And I can stand in front of you as a former athlete and tell you I did honestly care more about football and basketball and baseball at times than academics. But athletics kept me focused. It kept me engaged. It kept me involved in school even when I was struggling. It built this self-esteem and discipline that I now apply to my job and that I eventually applied to my academic work to become a strong student. That's the opportunity all of our children have if we provide the right wraparound services and focus on the whole child. Exceptional talent. We have great teachers, we have great principals, and we already have great leaders. The challenge is how do we keep them in our district, but more importantly, how do we build a pipeline of new leaders, of new teachers to work with our students? We know that 65% of our teachers are on the last parts of their career. Those teachers will naturally be retiring. Who will replace them? How do we create new pipelines with our universities for teachers and leaders? How do we partner with our HBCUs so more individuals are student teaching in Detroit? How do we take APs, assistant principals, and move them away from just thinking about running a building managerially and move them into instructional leadership? These are opportunities and challenge, but the best way to raise student achievement is to have high-quality teachers and high-quality leaders, and we have to scale that. It's here. It exists in our system, but we have to make it a reflection of everywhere you go when students are engaged. And lastly, responsible stewardship. This is not only about being responsible, but it's also about being strategic. And this is honestly where some difficult work will happen, is challenging contracts that have historically been given to schools and even districts. It's saying, did we really have a return on investment? Can those contracts be translated in full-time staff to provide those same services with greater fidelity and stronger implementation? But that last component is not just about being transparent and being responsible, it's being strategic. It's aligning our budget in 1819 to these priorities, using our values as our guidepost, and making hard and difficult decisions to use a finite amount of resources to have the greatest at-scale impact of over now 50,000 students in our district. So I want to thank everyone for being here today. This is an important moment for this district because it's a point of celebration, but hopefully it's a little bit of clarity on who we will be, who we want to be, and how we're going to get to the point of making this the best urban school district in the country. We're not going to randomly make decisions. We're not going to randomly do things. We're going to now use this as our anchor and as our guide as we make hard and difficult decisions based on the best interests of children to create the greatest amount of impact at the greatest amount of speed for our children in Detroit. Thank you.
To now hear from a parent, Ms. Kyrie Jordan.
Well, thank you, Superintendent Beatty. I know a little bit about you, and I am fired up now, so fired up and ready to take on this challenge. Let me tell you, on behalf of the parents and alumni, speaking for my student, I'm committed to doing my part to help ensure not just my student, not just the students of my child's school, but every student has an excellent education. And I know that Detroit can provide that. I'm a witness of that. I'm a testimony. I moved back to Detroit to be a part of this very commitment before you came to being, before I voted for my new school board members. I'm so proud of you. before all of that, I made a decision that I would come back to Detroit and give my child, my son, the foundation that I had and that my daughter had that ensured her success in graduating from UNC Chapel Hill with a full scholarship. I'm just throwing that out there. But that was Detroit's foundation, and your blueprint is your core values are the same core values Detroit has always had. Detroit has been known for. We were creative. We were innovative. We were community oriented. That's who we are, and that's why Detroiters could move from Detroit and go anywhere, survive, thrive, and be stars. Because we were from Detroit, and that's why I came back, because I heard in the news what was said about my city, and I said, oh no, they don't know. And I'm going to take my son home to Detroit and show him. And just recently, he turned to me and he said, Mommy, I'm so glad we moved to Detroit. So I'm here to stay. I'm here to stay, and I know Detroit won't fully come back as a city until we get this part right, until we get the education part right. So I signed on as the Parent Action Leader, and I encourage all parents to sign up to do a little bit. 20 minutes a day will change your life and the life of not only your student, but every student in the school that you stepped into. Just 20 minutes, 3 times a week. You do more working out at the gym. You would do more working out at the gym than you would have to do in a school to make a valuable impact and difference, not only in the lives of the students, but in your life. It is true. If you want to stay young, stay around the children. If you want to grow, stay around the children. Grow the children. They are our future, and that is so cliche, but it is such the truth. And I am a witness to that. I am a testimony. I am whatever you need me to be, because I am all about the blueprint for 2020. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming out to our press conference this morning. I'd like to open the floor for questions from the media. If I have Dr. Beatty step up. Are there any questions? Rod?
Doctor, shooting for the stars as the goal is certainly laudable. That's what you aim for. But when the rubber meets the road and your budget gets into where you are, and the realities of that, how do you bridge that gap? What happens in that instance when you don't have the funds to be able to do a lot of the things that you say are your goals?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a reoccurring one as we begin to talk about the change and the specificity around some of the initiatives. You know, the first step is aligning the budget in 1819 to this plan, and so right now our budget, we're responsibly managing the budget, but it's not a strategic budget, and so what our goal is to take every penny and align it to this work. Once we do that, even in the first couple of years, we're going to start to see improvement. And then after that point, we can then articulate an ask of Lansing, and even before that, start to recognize gaps for a philanthropic ask, to then expand the work that's happening in more isolation because of the alignment and the improvement. So this is a phased approach. Phase 1, what is our plan? Now you're seeing it, at least in more details. We align the budget, we're going to start to see impact. Once we start to see impact, it's then becoming, how do we scale that? So a concrete example, once we create a full-service school in one of our schools, I will tell you right now, we're going to see an improvement in attendance. We're going to see a greater level of parent involvement. We're going to see less disciplinary issues. We're going to see an increase in student achievement. So then the question is, how do we replicate that? Well, within our budget, we're not going to be able to do that. Philanthropically, we might go a little deeper, farther, but that's when we go to Lansing to say, if you're really serious about our children having a real competitive opportunity in the city of Detroit, in this country, in this world, you need to pay for it. And you need to realize that just giving everyone the same is not really going to address that issue. But we have a level of responsibility right now with our new board and with me coming in to get it right and prove we can get it right. Once we do that, I think we'll create greater credibility and then make those demands, but we'll actually have data and performance to make that ask. Right now, I think it's too early to do that until we create greater credibility. Lori.
What enrollment counts do you need to hit in future years in order to keep the district stable?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now we're in a good place. We're going to be more analytical going into this year and next to project out the kind of increases that we want over time. But I think our goal is just to continue to increase. The details behind that will be analytical regarding this year's improvement and how we build on that. I have no doubt that we're going to slowly see an increase in enrollment for the same reasons that it happened this year, with only a short runway. As our runway expands and we start to show people what we're able to do, I honestly believe that the average Detroiter wants their child in traditional public education. There's a legacy connected to DPS that no charter school, no private school has, and that's our advantage. We have roots and we have tradition. No one else has that. Now we just have to deliver something that's different and unique and scalable, and that's going to be our work, and we're going to build proof points to do that.
Dr. Beatty, are there breakdowns of the growth in enrollment, any particular section of the sections of the city where you see more students being enrolled, and at which grade levels? Is it elementary, middle, high school, and what kind of impact does having the EAA schools come back into the district have on that number? Sure.
So the EAA schools coming back certainly led to an increase in enrollment, but our increases go beyond EAA. And many naysayers actually thought that many EAA children would not come to DPS-CD. That was a fear that I heard even during the interview phase. So that didn't pan out. When we look at enrollment, we're seeing increases, and this is common sense, in schools that have stronger programs. So our Montessori programs that were implemented last year have been successful. For example, the redesign of Randolph has led to over 300 students enrolling there. So it's a cliche, but if you build it, they will come. And we have to build the right programming for children, and then create better culture at those schools as far as levels of engagement with parents and students. So it was spread out across the district. I wouldn't say that it's K-8 more than high school, but I would say the defining point in individual schools, better programming, and I would say a higher level of ownership on enrollment by the principal and the teachers at those schools.
Dr. Beatty, yes. What are some of your timelines for arts and music? Talk about Crystal bringing that back to the district.
The fall.
So did it started already?
So we're already internally reviewing budgets and opportunities and philanthropic opportunities. Those have already come forward as projections. So I think in the fall it'll be a combination of philanthropic investment along with our own investment as a district as we move into next year. So it's fall of 18, correct. And so I think people underestimate the opportunity to be strategic in your budget. And so when we say these are priorities, these are not just nice, visuals. We're going to move money to fund these things. But I'm already telling everyone now, brace yourselves, because you can't fund these things unless you defund fund other things. And there are things in our system right now that are not actually yielding results, okay? They're just linked to things that we've always done. So if everyone wants art and music, then we're going to have to do something else. And that might be eliminating 3 contracts. I don't have anything wrong with those 3 individuals or those 3 entities, but they're not linked to this. And so we don't have a money tree, but we have funding that we need to move to drive these priorities. Same thing with teacher salaries. It's a priority, exceptional talent. And so we're going to have to move dollars as a priority. So as we build the budget, those are priorities, and as you fund those things, other things have to go on the wayside.
You did some of that shifting in the Ball County to
Correct.
And music.
Right.
This is an example of what you defunded or what you took funding away from.
Well, a perfect example is I defunded professional development that was contracted out because there were millions of dollars going out to contracts that provided professional development with no real clear record of achievement. And I also thought that it demoralized staff to have consultants come in constantly and train individuals when we had internal capacity or the contract's amount were too much. That's a solid example of that.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
In terms of the carrot and the stick, when the district falls short, as it's likely to do early on, what is the, I don't know, is it discipline? What is the consequence for not taking accountability, for not doing all the things that you've set out here as your goals?
Well, I think we have to look at this as a learning process. We are an organization led by educators, as a former teacher, as a former principal. And I think you have to take that same approach with adults to a certain extent, meaning there is an acculturation process, there's a buy-in process, there has to be a communication process, an understanding process of where we are and where we want to go. And I've said this repeatedly, I am comfortable with pushback. I'm comfortable with points of clarification. But what we can't do is do things that we've always done. And what we can't do is look at this solely individually and only looking at what is in the best interest of me as the employee and moving more to the collective. That's more about changing culture. But as far as accountability, I don't think anyone has to look very far to know that I don't have any challenge with accountability for myself or the people that work for me. I push, I advocate, I try to outwork everybody, and I try to be extremely transparent with our body of work. I think we just over time have to do a good job of setting the expectations clearly, supporting people to make those expectations, and when we don't see a commitment or we see failure in performance, then we start making those hard decisions of not renewing contracts or putting individuals in different positions. But that will take time. But I've already done that coming in when the board asked me to evaluate district staff. And I made hard, difficult decisions with individuals that had been here for a long time. So accountability is not the challenge. I think instead it's time to build culture and to build a culture of trust and understanding and clarity on what we need to do moving forward. Yes.
And Dr. Beatty, you said when you arrived you found a shocking lack of systems for everything from hiring teachers to ordering things. So where are you in building those systems to make all this a reality? And
yeah.
What have you done and what do you have to do still?
Sure. This work is ongoing. And I think we all know that, a lot of my direct reports are here in the audience. We have principals in the audience. We are working nonstop. I mean, I don't know how else to say that. That's not an exaggeration. And we're trying to overcome just lack of systems in the past. Honestly, I'll even recognize Ivy. I think we're working her at another level. So, we're constantly meeting. We're constantly constantly talking about doing things differently, and that speaks to the collaboration and the willingness to own the work. But we've made progress, and so the budget, for example, we just processed a budget amendment only a month ago. That was restructuring the budget at the district level, and so we cut initiatives, we moved dollars that weren't earmarked to certain things to start to create a fund balance. Those are concrete steps forward to reestablish this district. Now we're going to work at district level or school level budgets as we recreate this. We hired 300 teachers in 2 months. Last year we hired 30 from January to the end of the year. That's a concrete systems change that is yielding results. But to directly answer your question, everything is about a phase and a process. So depending on the initiative or the system, that could be done in a week, it could be done in a month, it could take a year, depending on the particular system or process. But it's just constantly problem solving and moving the attention to the next problem. And I'll stand in front of you 3 years from now, and we'll have problems. That's the nature of running organizations. There are problems in Ford Motor Company every day. It's just not talked about in the media. But we are constantly dealing with issues and problems. But what's different about our district is we're going to own them and collectively own them and problem solve through them and not make excuses about it. I'll take 2 more and then we'll wrap it up. Yes.
Where are you in terms of hiring more teachers, and what is the strategy? You mentioned that some teachers will be retiring, so the number of vacancies could go up. How do you plan to deal with that whole issue, given that that's one of your priorities, exceptional?
Yeah, so, you asked me yesterday what was my greatest concern right now. My greatest concern is teacher vacancies, with all things considered. We have to be fully staffed. And so, again, just to go back, 250 to 275 vacancies on average last year, depending on the day. Right now we have about 150 vacancies. We have another teacher fair this evening at Ben Carson again. So 150 versus 250, 275 is a significant improvement. Additionally, we have 11 EA schools and 250 classrooms in addition to last year. So we're making progress. Concretely, we've made changes in human resources with a new set of team, individuals that are just focused on recruiting teachers. Last year, we didn't have one person who woke up every day to say, I'm here to recruit teachers. So that's a systems change. We have job fairs that we're doing consistently. That's a system change. We can access applications in the Wayne County system. We didn't do that before. That's a systems change. But moving forward, a couple things need to happen. We have to offer incentives for those teachers in hard-to-staff schools, former EA schools, partnership schools. We have to think differently about offering higher acknowledgement of experience outside of Detroit for those teachers that are willing to come into Detroit. But we can't do that because we will naturally upset teachers that have been here for a long time, that have not seen a process of making them whole based on years of loss of salary. So Ivy and I are meeting almost every week to continue to figure out how do we make teachers whole that have been here, and how do we increase salary for experience outside. Those are ways that we're going to increase our teacher pool. And then it's what I talked about earlier, pipeline development. Our student teachers have to be in Detroit. So we're trying to create as many memos of understanding right now with Wayne State, Michigan State, even Michigan is part of the conversation now. And we're working with HBCUs on memos of understanding to move teachers here for student teaching. We're also trying to develop an alternative certification program owned by the district. And that will help recruit individuals, undergraduates that want to teach that don't have certification. Okay, thank you everyone for being here.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Fox 10 News Now stream, part of Fox10Phoenix.com. We're going to take you out to New York for the Economic Club. The Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross with a keynote address here.
Not as much as I'd like.
We can change that. We can have you speak to us again next week if you like. But let's start this conversation. I know you've been very involved in the administration's current tax reform efforts, and please give us your thoughts on the progress there and the timing, and what are your expectations?
Sure. Well, we really refer to it more as tax cut than just tax reform, because the real purpose is to give businesses and middle-class people more net income than they otherwise would have had. So it's really tax cut. We had a very good breakthrough quite recently when the House representatives agreed not to pursue the 12 amendments that they were originally proposing for the budget deal, and instead to go along with it as it was. And where that's important is several things. First of all, had there been debates over a lot of amendments, probably would have cost us a week or 10 days. And we're trying very hard to get the tax program, the tax cuts, enacted by the end of the calendar year. There's no special magic to it, but we'd really like to get it done. This will help because there won't be the debates over budget. But even more than that, I think the reason they cooperated on the budget was in anticipation that it would facilitate the tax program. So it's a good sign from that point of view, and it's a good sign because we need reconciliation, and for a bunch of very technical reasons, this was a precursor to getting to use reconciliation so that we only need 51 votes in the Senate, because in today's partisan world, getting 60 votes on anything is not very likely.
And do you expect that we'll address with some success both individual tax reform as well as corporate tax reform?
We certainly think so, and we hope so. That is very much on the president's agenda. There are a couple of areas that are a little more controversial than others. One is the state and local tax deductibility, which probably is something everybody in this room is pretty interested in. There's a lot of talk now about putting some sort of a cap on the income level up to which those might be deductible. There is no deductibility contained in the president's own message, but as we get into the sausage machine called Congress, wouldn't surprise me if there was some tweaking of that. So that's something moving forward.
And the high tax rate for individuals, is that?
Yeah, there's also some talk, I don't know what Congress will ultimately decide, some talk about adding a fourth bracket above the 35% cap that has been requested by the president. Again, we don't know exactly where that stands. You start getting to the very, very high levels, you get to where there are very few people involved.
And does it matter if it's 3 brackets versus 4 brackets, in your opinion?
Well, we're for simplicity, so we'd prefer the 3, and we believe that the reduction from 39.6 to 35 is really very well offset by changing the other deductibilities, particularly the state and local taxes. So if it were left untouched, we think that while the people would have a lower rate in the 35% bracket, they probably wouldn't really be paying less tax because of caps on the other deductibilities. And nobody pays 39.6 as an effective rate anyway. The top 1% of the population pays an effective tax rate of 27.2. So you should really count the comparison between that and whatever comes out as the definition of whether the super rich get a break or they don't. So it's really 27.2 for the top 1%, and for the top 5%, they pay an effective rate of 23.6. So it's somewhat lower, but still nothing like the 39.6.
Gotcha. Just using some data here. Kevin Hassett of the Council of Economic Advisors has projected that real wages for the average worker would grow by roughly $4,000 if this tax reform happens. Question is, can the administration and Congress succeed in convincing middle-class voters that this is something that really impacts them in a positive way, something as esoteric as corporate tax reform might sound to the average person?
Right. Well, I think the middle-class voters are very much in favor of the overall tax cuts. I don't think that's so much the problem. I think there's some problem of communicating their desires to the people in the Congress, but I think the middle-class people get it, because what will really happen is we laid out the framework for the taxes. The Congress will write the detailed legislation, and when they do, I imagine everybody's going to get out their handheld and figure out, well, what does that mean to their individual taxes? And that's what will determine how they feel about it.
I hope you're right about that, because there does seem to be some pushback on corporations benefiting at the expense of individuals, and so I hope that we can do a better job of marketing that,
right,
the message of the facts.
Well, it's a little complicated because the left-wing press doesn't go along with it. They say you're just putting money in the pockets of the shareholders. Well, first of all, that's not necessarily a horrible thing, even if it were all that happened. But in reality, think about tax as one of the costs that businesses pay. So you have tax, you have your raw materials, you have your value added, important among which is wages. So if you've lowered one of those components, there's clearly more room to deal with the others and to deal with capital expenditures that will create new jobs and new opportunities. So it isn't an immediately self-evident connection, but there's a logic to it. And whether it's exactly 4,000 or not, directionally, it's hard for me to imagine that workers are not better off if the corporation does better. Has to follow. And there's interesting comparison. If you take the 10 lowest tax countries of big countries in the world and the 10 highest tax, in the last several years, the growth rate in wages in the 10 lowest tax countries has been 2 percentage points a year higher than the growth rate of wages in the 10 highest tax countries. That doesn't prove the exact same thing will happen here, but it does confirm the inherent logic of the proposal.
Mr. Secretary, I appreciate the work of the Department of Commerce on the EU-US Privacy Shield and congratulate you on the success of the first annual review. But how do you gauge the value of cross-border data flows to growth to the U.S. economy, and how can we protect our global enterprises against the type of trade barriers that some nations put up to say, they're doing this under the guise of data privacy protections?
Right. Well, the privacy shield that we worked out with the EU, and then we worked out a separate one with the country of Switzerland, is a very, very important thing because it solves that problem of data localization and solves it very effectively. We now have 2,533 American companies have signed up for it, and we're adding about 20 per week. So it's been very, very well received within the U.S. business community. And the European Commission sent a big delegation to Washington a few weeks ago because technically it's a joint program, but the Commerce Department administers it. And they were very pleased with the first annual review that they made. So I was very happy because our relations with the EU are kind of complex. But on this case, we did very well with their evaluation, and hopefully that will let us spread the Privacy Shield concept to other nations as well. It's worked flawlessly. We don't know of any big problems that have come up.
Some of the most important sources of data in the U.S. economy come from government sources such as the Census Bureau. And in my industry, in the retail industry, we've seen just rapid shifts in change of consumption from things to experiences, and from physical stores to the digital platforms. And we talked about a little bit about this. While the numbers, the volume numbers are captured, and even the total workforce is captured, they're categorized differently. So in my case, you capture under retail people who work in a physical store, but not those who are fulfilling this gigantic online business that stores like us have. And that matters to us in terms of the count and where emphasis goes and is placed. Is there a way to have the census capture more accurately in the future the gigantic shifts that we've seen in this digital economy over the last several years?
Well, what we do capture right now is whatever Macy's reports comes into Macy's employment figure. So that part is in there already. We're continually trying to refine the data that we publish. Commerce Department publishes 40% of all the written data that come out of the U.S. government, including obviously the census material and the Bureau of Economic Analysis material. So we're constantly trying to refine it. But right now, our big chore is getting ready for the 2020 Decennial Census. That's going to involve the biggest rollout that you can imagine. We will have to hire, train, get to do the counting, and then get rid of 500,000 people in 2020. And it's going to be a real challenge. In the last census, which was 2010, there was fairly high unemployment because of the 2008. Now, as we're moving toward very full employment, it's going to be quite a challenge to find 500,000 people who can do an accurate job with the handheld and really make a perfect census count. So that's the challenge that we're grappling with. The other challenges are to improve how quickly we can get the monthly numbers and the weekly numbers out. And we're trying also to get them more accurate in the first reporting than before. We're keeping very careful track of the percentage revisions that are coming from the first one to the later ones, because we know a lot of people rely on those data.
And speaking of head count, there's been a challenge in Washington of filling jobs and actually recruiting for those jobs. And
right.
How about the Commerce Department? Are you satisfied that you have the hands, the workforce in order to get the work done that you've set out as your agenda?
Well, we have 47,000 employees, so it isn't like a small department. And we're quite fortunate in that the career staff there are, by and large, very qualified people, very interested in their job, very dedicated to it, and not particularly ideological. Some of the other departments have a little different mixture of people, so they have a little different problem. So the issue we've had is trying to get people disentangled from a very dysfunctional manner of bureaucracy that characterizes the federal government. The other problem, has been with the Congress. The Democrats have been slow-walking the nominations. Even in my own case, which as it happens was not particularly controversial, they slow-walked it for a couple of months, and at the end of the day, I got 70-some-odd votes out of the 100, so it was clearly not very controversial, but they delayed it just to slow things down. They've been very slow also on the ambassadorial nominations. So we have quite a few embassies that literally do not have a permanent ambassador at present. And given the challenges in the globe, it's really a problem, and it makes it complicated to get things done.
Let's shift to international, and starting with China, which is clearly one of our most important trading partners, both for economic reasons as well as national security reasons. And the stated goal of the administration is to improve our value of the relationship on our side and to reduce this trade inequity between China and the United States. Can you talk about the current state of that relationship and the situation?
Sure. At the Mar-a-Lago summit back in the spring, President Xi and President Trump began to develop a very good personal relationship, and that's been fostered since then. They speak on the phone quite often, and they're by and large relatively cordial conversations. So at the human level, there's a much better rapport than the prior administration had with the Chinese leadership. We then have had 2 sessions at the Strategic and Economic Dialogue with the Chinese. One was at Mar-a-Lago itself. The other was a couple weeks ago in Washington. And now we'll be continuing that in Beijing in a few weeks. Beijing is a very important part of the president's trip. So I was in Beijing and Hong Kong, for that matter, and Bangkok and Laos a couple weeks ago, kind of getting ready for the president's trip. And I think there will be some decent deliverables come out of the Beijing meeting. Deliverables, as you remember, after Mar-a-Lago, we got a few things. We got cattle being shipped to China. We got some biotech things granted. We got some licenses granted for investment banking. We got a bunch of things going, some work on the electronic payment processing. We hope to get more of those kinds of issues as well. But some of the issues between China and the U.S. are inherently very complex and will take a little time to resolve. The issues of intellectual property right, the issues of forced localization, the issues of forced technology transfers, those are very big, very important issues that we're going to take a little time to resolve.
And there's a feeling that among the business community that the rules and standards of doing business in China are different than the rules that we apply for Chinese companies doing business in America. Is there a chance for that to be equalized in these negotiations?
Well, we hope so. And it's not just China. A lot of countries do not have a level playing field. When you really think about it, the only country that comes close to being a free trader is the United States. China, Europe, Japan, Korea, all these others, they talk about free trade, but in fact they practice highly protectionist behavior, including what happens to companies on the ground. So those are serious issues. They're issues we're trying very hard to deal with, and they go against some of the fundamental philosophies. If you've read China's 2025 plan, basically saying they're seeking self-sufficiency in all the major areas of technological improvement by 2025, as opposed to extreme dependence on imported talent, imported intellectual property, and imported products from the West. So it runs directly contrary to that stated national goal. What we don't know is now that President Xi has been elevated to practically Mao-type status, the question is, will that make it easier to deal with him now that he's consolidated power, or will it make it more difficult? I'll tell you better after the November visit.
And on a related note, North Korea is a hot topic, and you're welcome to make any comment about your understanding or what can be shared in that regard. But one thing that's on our mind is does this impede our negotiating abilities with China, since they are obviously a sensitive and the largest trading partner?
Well, it complicates things because even though they're totally separate things or conceptually separate things, truth is everything relates to everything else. We do believe, though, that China has become much more cooperative in terms of enforcing the sanctions than they had been. We're seeing that in terms of the banking system. We're seeing that in terms of supplying fuel oil to North Korea. We're seeing it in terms of limiting the coal exports from North Korea to China. So we're seeing some real improvement in their enforcement. On the other hand, some of the Chinese individual companies are going their own way. You may have seen some few months ago, Commerce Department initiated a litigation which Justice Department prosecuted very effectively against ZTE. ZTE is the second largest telecom equipment company in China, and they were violating the sanctions both on North Korea and on Iran. So we levied a fine of $1.1 billion on them, and hopefully that will modify their behavior somewhat.
Meaningful, I think. Okay, let's move to closer to our borders and talk about Nafta. This is a 23-year-old agreement. It obviously requires modernization. Can you tell us the progress, if there is any, between either Mexico or Canada or in totality?
Sure. Well, we just finished, I guess it was the fourth session in Washington, and there were a couple of developments at it. One was we had been assuming that we would probably have to get whatever's going to be the outcome of NAFTA finalized by December because of the political calendar. Namely, the Mexican presidential elections are the middle of next year, Canadian provincial elections middle of next year, our Trade Promotion Authority, the fast track, expires in July of next year, and then we have our midterm elections. So our general feeling had been that as you get much into 2018, the political rhetoric will get too complicated for anything as complicated as a 2,800-page trade agreement to get anywhere. However, the Mexicans at the conclusion of the last meeting said they feel that it will be functional, at least from their point of view, at least until the end of March. So that's good in one sense, in that it gives a little more time to deal with the complexities. It's bad in the sense that if there's a delayed deadline, some of the decisions will get delayed too. So the uncertainty that now prevails in the business community will go on a little bit longer, because you don't have a deal on anything till you have a deal on everything.
The original stated goal was to create an agreement by first quarter 2018, I believe. Is that unrealistic?
Well, no, I think it will. We hopefully will be by the first quarter. We had been hoping in the administration to get it done this calendar year, but that does not appear likely anymore. It does appear likely it will come to whatever conclusion it does by the end of March.
The president has said on several occasions that he would consider withdrawing altogether from NAFTA. Is that a possibility, one? And do you need that in terms of your negotiation powers on that subject? And if so, what kind of impact would that have on the economy and on consumers and what they'd pay for goods coming across the borders?
Right. Well, I think the president has made his own position very clear, very repeatedly, so you don't need me to paraphrase what he has already said very publicly and very much in private as well. I think we would all prefer a good deal, a sensible deal, to no deal, but we would prefer no deal to a crummy deal. And so somewhere in between those parameters is where we'll have to see what happens.
And if it did get to a point where there was no deal, can you size the impact on the economy?
Well, the U.S. exports to the U.S. represent 30% of the entire Mexican economy. So by whatever measure you want to make it, they have an awful lot more at risk than we do. They also do in that, as you know, they have a sustained trade surplus with us. So also, but they have overall a trade deficit. So if things with us change, there are very radical implications for the Mexican economy. But the reason we have to do something, and I'm just using Mexico as an example, pre-NAFTA, U.S. every year had a $4 to $5 billion trade surplus with Mexico, and Mexico had around a $25 billion trade deficit overall. Post-NAFTA, Mexico still has a 20-some-odd billion trade deficit with the rest of the world, but now they have a huge trade surplus with us. The cumulative trade deficit that the United States has run up with Mexico since NAFTA, can you guess what amount it is? $1 trillion. $1 trillion cumulative trade deficit. That's a huge number, and it's something that even attracts attention in Washington.
I'm going to ask you a personal question now. So you had a pretty good life, a year ago. Your things were going pretty great for you, and I can't imagine anything was that you'd want to fix or repair back then. And you took on this big responsibility. What is the biggest upside that you were surprised by taking on this new responsibility, and what do you miss the most?
Okay, well, those are complicated questions. I'm glad you reserved 2 hours for the answer. But shorthand, biggest surprises in Washington has been how nice a place it is to live. It's a very, very habitable city. Now, admittedly, it helps some being a pretty high person in a one-company town. That gives you a certain amount of social cachet. But even forgetting that, we love the house that we bought down there. The restaurant scene is extraordinary. There's one fairly new restaurant that already has a Michelin star. I would not have expected that in Washington. So the restaurant scene's been good. The cultural scene is quite extraordinary, even by New York standards. We were at the opening of the Vermeer show at the National Gallery about a week ago. Extraordinary exhibition, very, very well presented. So the habitation part of Washington has been excellent. What's been disappointing has been the partisan nature of what's going on down there. And we addressed that a little bit before. I think it's very sad that the national interests are being held hostage to local political concerns. I don't know that there's anything that can be done immediately to change that, but it is a problem. It's bad that there are a lot of unfilled political posts in the administration. It's very bad that we don't have all the ambassadors in place, and it's bad that legislation becomes a knife fight. So that's the disappointing part about it. And related to that, the Congress, it turns out, is much more process-oriented than it is results-oriented. There are all these rules and procedures and things that they abide by that really are the enemy of efficiency. And so that's been a little bit of a challenge.
You were, well, in your former life, you were well liked on both sides of the aisles. And I mentioned some of that in my earlier remarks about you, but you seem to be able to cross the aisle, very successfully, graciously. That become more difficult now?
No, we've been doing it on a social basis. So far, it has not had any discernible result politically. But on a social
But you're
basis,
still friends.
that they do not boycott our dinner parties.
I see. So on, I know you've been deeply involved with regulatory reform, and
Yes.
you have a lot of thoughts about that, particularly as it relates to infrastructure improvements and
Oh, yeah.
manufacturing. So talk about that a little bit and where we are, where we're going.
Yeah, I actually should have brought with me, I have a big chart in my office that's about as tall as that panel and about as wide as the one border of it. And what it lists are the 120 some odd different steps that are required to get a major infrastructure project approved. There's state level, there's sometimes local level and federal level, and they don't even agree about what the criteria are, what the forms are, and they certainly don't do anything in parallel. They do things in sequence. And that's why it can take 8 or 10 years or longer to get permits done. We're working very hard to fix that, because I think it's one of the worst parts about the whole system is the regulatory burden in general, but specifically in infrastructure. We're going to try, when the infrastructure bill comes out sometime after the tax cuts, we're going to be trying to put in some fairly specific things about cutting through the regulatory quagmire. I had in the CEO of Rio Tinto not so long ago, and he had a horrible tale to tell, and he's made it public, so I'm not saying anything out of school. He's been going quite a few years on getting the permits for what could very well be the world's largest copper mine, an open pit mine in Arizona. And he still has no certainty that he'll get the permit, but he's in the tub for a couple of $100 million already. No, this is a thing that's not taking one penny of federal money, would be very good from our balance of trade point of view, be good from employment point of view, good from a lot of points of view, and meanwhile, money is being burned up and nothing is happening. And tragically, that's not a unique experience. So I think if we can get that regulatory reform done, you'll see a lot more capital spending at the very large scale end. And we're hoping very much for that to happen, and as well to come with an administration-sponsored infrastructure plan. But even short of that, the president has eliminated something like 860 rules and regulations thus far in his administration. And almost every CEO who comes in to see me, before they make whatever request it is, what they want us to do, they usually start out by thanking us for the regulatory reform that's already occurred. And there's more to go. In the last couple of years of the Obama administration, I'm told they put into effect 7,000 rules and regulations. 7,000. Now think about it. Was this country such a wild and woolly place 2 years earlier that it needed 10 new regulations every single day for 2 years? That seems hard to imagine. But it's also hard finding all these little rules and digging them out and getting rid of them. So we will be getting rid of more things, not to endanger public safety, not to endanger public health, but there are far too many abusive rules, and there are also far too many regulators out in the fields who have gone beyond the letter of the law and imposed their own, in effect, rules.
You've got unemployment at 4.2. You've got the markets booming at record highs, and yet GDP growth is very, very low, and not where historically it's been following periods of recession. We're now deeply past that period, and we still haven't created the momentum yet in growth.
Well, we're starting. I think if you view the stock market as a leading indicator, which I do, because its whole purpose is to forecast the future, I think that's a good omen. And it's a good omen in other regards as well. The fact is, corporate executives feel better when their stock is up. They do more M&A, they do more CapEx, they do more hiring. It just creates a better feel. So that's one already good thing. Second, economic growth is better than the new normal that Larry Summers had proclaimed. I always called it the new dismal, but he called it the new normal, where we would already have been over 3% in this past quarter if it hadn't been for the hurricane activity. And we think that will be a snapback very, very quickly, particularly in the Houston part, because the part of Houston that was hit was mostly a fairly prosperous part, so there won't be a big lag in getting things fixed. Where there will be some more delays, more problems, is in Puerto Rico because of their own economic issues.
So in all these companies where you were chairman or lead director, you had a reputation for the person in the room who was thoughtful and measured and could give calm and clear advice. What would you say, that was the skills that were recognized and written about you, not something I'm making up here. What would you say are the skills that are required in your new role in Washington?
Not so sure they're any different. What's different is the currency. In my old world, the currency was actual currency, the pay that you gave people. And you could use that as a reward and punishment system to modify behavior. And it did. It worked pretty well. Most people in our industry can add and subtract very, very effectively. And so it modified behavior. In government, it's a very horizontal pay structure, very flat. There's no giant pyramid. And so currency is not the motivator. What's the motivator is titles, and heaven help you if you get wrong the title of the 5th third assistant to the 4th associate director of the undersecretary. You get into real trouble if you screw up the title. So titles are an important thing. Responsibility is an important thing. How many people report to them? And then simple things like recognition. Giving them awards and things. So the currency is different. And in many ways it's less effective because there's not the immediacy of reward to behavior that you tend to have, especially in hedge fund or private equity worlds. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there. But the people, at least in commerce, are very hardworking, very well informed, very good technical skills. The trick is to make them feel a little more appreciated and to be willing to volunteer things. Washington is not a place set up for inculcating change. It's systemic resistance to change. So trying to get people to do things more quickly, to volunteer suggestions, is a little bit of a lift. They tend to be kind of cautious in that sort of behavior. And we had it one of the early days in commerce, a trade case came. Trade enforcement, as you know, is a big part of our task. So this case came in. I sat with the examiner trying to educate myself, and I said, boy, this looks to me like a very clear, very open and shut case of dumping. What do you think? And he said, oh, yes, I absolutely agree. So I said, well, how quickly can we get it done so that we can enforce the rules? And he said, well, I think we can probably get it done within the 120-day statutory limit. So 120 days, we just agreed that this is an open and shut case. Why is it 120 days? And he said, well, Ms. Secretary, I know you knew at the job, but that's the time frame. And that was the mindset. If there's a statutory period, it's good if you can just comply with it and not go beyond it rather than accelerating it. Well, we're making decisions a little more rapidly now than that. But it was an example, and this guy is not a bad employee, he's a good employee. It's just that was the mindset, 120 days, 120 days. So those things are cultural things that are hard to change, and corporate culture is always hard to change, even more particularly when they know you're not a 20-year person. You're not going to be there for 20 years in all likelihood. So there's a little bit of a tendency in some of the departments, we can outweight the political appointees. That is not particularly true in commerce. They've been very, very cooperative.
Finally, is there a question that I didn't ask that you're dying to answer?
Yeah, what are we having for lunch?
Well, it's right around the corner, so thank you very much, Secretary Ross. Been very helpful for us to get your insights. We very much appreciate your coming here.
Thank you very much, Terry.
1 second. Just to remind you all, first of all, thanks for coming today. We're going to have
All right, folks, you are taking a live look here at a crash involving multiple vehicles blocking all but the right lane on State Route 51 northbound just past Union Hills. And right now, folks, we don't know the extent of the injuries here, but you could see just one lane as drivers having to pull all the way to the right there as they have to dodge this accident as they continue on there on 51. Once again, folks, welcome to the Fox 10 News Now stream, part of fox10phoenix.com. Very latest info we have for you is just from ADOT right now, saying that this crash involving multiple vehicles blocking all but the right lane on State Route 51 northbound just past Union Hills. As you can see, this could be a problem for rush hour in the next hour or so if they don't get this cleared up right now. But you can see there multiple vehicles. I'm trying to see how many. It's hard to see right there, but at least two. As you can see, not only are the drivers having to get all the way to that right lane, but then they also slow down and take a look before they continue on there on State Route 51. So we always encourage people not to do that, to not slow down, because you're just causing a bigger bottleneck when you do that. But it just seems like everybody always does. After they get through an accident, they've been pretty much at a standstill, and then they finally get to go and they take a look and continue to slow down motorists behind them, and it's just a chain reaction situation then, which just continues to slow down everyone and could get pretty tight there by rush hour. So we're hoping they clear this up and hoping for the very best for all those people involved in the accident. You can see that the ambulance is still out there, as well as fire officials and the police. Still no word yet on any injuries associated with this crash. You are watching News Now right here on fox10phoenix.com. We also have another update from ADOT. This one, it doesn't have to do with this crash, but I-17 northbound to I-10 westbound ramp, a disabled vehicle was blocking the right lane there. So that is what is happening here in Phoenix, as we're having some car issues as well on the roadways there on this Thursday, Friday Eve, October 26th. All right, folks, and that's going to do it for us today here on News Now. We are going to be shutting down the stream, but we will be back here tomorrow at noon Eastern, 9 o'clock out here in Arizona. We wish you guys the very best, and have a great night, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.